Part 1. The Line I Shouldn't Have Crossed. I never thought I'd be the man who cheated. Not because I was above it, but because I always thought I'd see it coming. Some slippery slope, a warning sign, a flashing red light that said, "You're about to ruin your life." But there wasn't any of that. Just a long silence in my marriage and a single moment that cracked me open. My name's Daniel. I'm 38. I've been married to Julia for 12 years. We have 2 kids, Liam, who's 9, and Sophie, who just turned 6. If you saw us from the outside, you'd think we had it all. The suburban house, 2 cars in the garage, a trampoline in the backyard. It looked solid. But inside, it was cold. Julia and I stopped really talking somewhere around Liam's 5th birthday. Not suddenly, it was gradual, like frost on glass. At first, it's nothing. Then one morning, you can't see through it anymore. We still functioned. We made schedules, shopped for groceries, talked about homework and bath times. But it wasn't a marriage anymore. It was an arrangement. A very polite, very efficient arrangement. I never planned to betray her. But then I met Claire. It started at a conference in Chicago. I was there for work, speaking on a panel about mid-level management systems. Dry stuff, honestly. Claire was part of the marketing team for another company. She wasn't stunning in the traditional sense, but she had something, a spark, a quick wit. And when we talked over cocktails that night, I felt like someone had turned the lights back on in a house I'd been wandering in the dark for years. I told myself it was innocent. A conversation, a drink, a laugh. But something shifted when we ended up in the hotel elevator together. She said, "I'm on 12. She brushed her hair back. Me too. We stood in silence for a moment. The air between us was tense, charged. Then, just before the doors opened, she asked, "Are you coming?" It wasn't a question about logistics. I knew that. I wish I could say I hesitated longer. I didn't. The next morning, I sat on the edge of her bed, staring at my phone, looking at a picture of my kids. The guilt wasn't slow to arrive. It hit me like a punch to the ribs. But what surprised me more was how alive I felt. Like I'd remembered I was still a man, still someone with a beating heart and a mind that could want something more than routine. When I came home, Julia barely looked up. She asked how the trip was. I said, fine. We went back to folding laundry. The affair didn't end there. Claire lived in Seattle, but she traveled often. We met in New York, then Denver, then Miami. Always hotels, always pretending it was just this one time again. I didn't fall in love with her, at least not in the way I loved Julia once, but I fell into something I couldn't name. A version of myself I hadn't seen in years. I should have ended it. Every time I looked at my kids sleeping, I thought, what the hell are you doing, Daniel? But the truth is, I wasn't trying to destroy my family. I was trying to survive it. There's a difference. Julia wasn't cruel. She wasn't cold. She was exhausted, worn down by the daily grind, by motherhood, by years of me probably failing to show up in ways she needed. We both stopped being lovers a long time ago. We just didn't admit it out loud. But then something changed. Claire said, "I'm tired of waiting for scraps of you." That night she gave me an ultimatum. Leave her or I'm gone. I didn't answer. And then I did the unthinkable. I went back to Julia. Not because Claire gave me an ultimatum, but because I realized I didn't want to leave. I wanted to fix it. If that was even still possible. Part 2. The house that guilt built. I stopped seeing Claire. Not because I stopped wanting her. I still checked my phone every hour for days, waiting for a message that never came. I deleted her contact, blocked her number, and swore I'd put it all behind me. But guilt has a strange taste. It lingers. It seeps into everything. I started waking up earlier, making breakfast for the kids, offering to help Julia more around the house. I told myself it was the right thing to do, but in truth, I was trying to patch a hole with duct tape and hope she wouldn't see the flood behind it. Julia noticed the change. Of course she did. One evening, while we were brushing our teeth in silence, she looked at me in the mirror and said, "Did someone die?" I laughed too quickly. "No, why? You're acting like you're making up for something." I choked on nothing. "Just trying to be better." "Better than what?" She didn't ask again, but I could feel the crack in the wall between us beginning to spread. We started going on walks together after dinner. Short ones. Sometimes we didn't talk, sometimes we did. I told her about work, about a podcast I liked, about a book I hadn't finished. She told me about Sophie's nightmares, about Liam's teacher, about how she hadn't felt like herself in years. One night she said it without looking at me. "I miss being touched by someone who wanted to touch me." It hit me like a punch. I stood frozen, keys in my hand, unsure if I was allowed to respond. Then she added, "I miss when we used to see each other." And just like that, I realized the marriage I thought had already died still had a pulse. Weak, but there. So I did something I never thought I would. I confessed. Not all of it. Not Claire's name, not how many times, not the cities, but I told her I had crossed a line. I told her I'd ended it, that I wasn't proud, that I didn't want to lose her. I expected yelling, tears, objects thrown across the room. Instead, Julia stared at the floor and whispered, "I knew." What? I knew it. Women always know, Daniel. Then why didn't you say anything? She shrugged. Because I didn't want to destroy the family either. That broke something in me. We stood there, both of us, suddenly naked. Not in body, but in all the ways we'd stopped being vulnerable. We were just two people in a quiet house full of unspoken pain, clinging to the life we'd built because neither of us could imagine blowing it up. And still, I hadn't told her the full truth. The worst part? Claire had messaged me the day after I blocked her, and I had read it. "If you ever want a life where you're not pretending, you know where to find me." I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. It sat there in my inbox like a loaded gun I never touched but kept in the drawer just in case. I started therapy, alone. I didn't tell Julia right away. I needed to go for myself first. I needed to figure out who I was without the affair, without the secret, without the fantasy. I needed to learn how to be a man who could look in the mirror and not flinch. Week by week, I started piecing myself back together. But shame is an animal that doesn't sleep. And one day, it came back. It was a Saturday, sunny. Julia and I had taken the kids to the park. On the way home, her phone buzzed. She picked it up, and her face changed. She turned pale. "What is it?" I asked. She handed me the phone. It was an email from Claire. She had found Julia's email. I don't know how. Maybe through social media, maybe through work. But she had sent her everything. Not just the truth. Pictures. Hotel receipts. Details. I had tried to bury it. I had tried to repair it. But now it was exposed. All of it. My carefully managed damage control was over. The fallout was coming. And the only thing left was what would survive it. Part 3. The Cost of Coming Clean. When Julia finished reading the email, she didn't cry. She stood up from the couch, walked into the kitchen, and started making tea. I followed her like a ghost, every breath in my lungs sharp and hollow. "Julia, don't." Not angry, not cold, but final. The next hour was silence. The kids were in their rooms. The air in the house was heavy like smoke after a fire. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat. "How long?" "Almost a year." "Is she in love with you?" "I don't know." "Are you in love with her?" I hesitated. "No." She nodded. "Then why?" That was the question, the one I'd been asking myself for months. Why risk it? Why betray the one person who had stood by me through everything? Why throw a grenade into the home we built? I felt invisible, like I was disappearing piece by piece. With her, I felt seen, wanted. And you didn't think I felt the same way? That maybe I needed you too? That maybe I was drowning in motherhood in trying to hold us all together while wondering if you even looked at me anymore? Her voice cracked. I moved closer. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I broke everything, but I didn't do it to leave. I never wanted out. I was weak. Julia's face twisted. Grief, fury, disgust, and something else. Heartbreak. You don't get to say
You didn't want out, Daniel. You left. Every time you went to her, you left. Maybe not physically, but emotionally, you weren't here. You abandoned me. You abandoned us. And then she walked out of the room. Upstairs. No slamming, no threats, just footsteps on hardwood that sounded like a door closing forever. The next few days were mechanical. We didn't talk unless we had to. The kids could feel it. Liam started wetting the bed again. Sophie kept asking why Mommy looked sad. I slept on the couch. And in those hours alone, when the house was dark and my phone silent, I realized something that made my stomach churn. I hadn't just cheated on Julia. I'd cheated on the man I wanted to be. 3 weeks later, she handed me a folded piece of paper. Inside, a list of therapists, marriage counselors. I'm not saying I forgive you, she said. I don't know if I can. But I owe it to the kids to try once. That once hit me harder than anything Claire ever said. We started going to therapy every Wednesday night. At first, it was awful. Raw, brutal, honest in ways we hadn't been since the early years. Julia cried. I cried. The therapist said things like emotional infidelity and rebuilding trust is like rebuilding bone. It has to break first. There were moments I thought we wouldn't make it. Moments Julia would look at me with eyes that didn't recognize me. But we kept going. And something strange started to happen. We began to laugh again. Just a little at first, then more. We sat closer. We touched more. We started noticing things about each other we'd